The China's economic myth. The intelligent people research how one economy can go up, but the wise ones think about how can one nation survive when it meets its downturns. We Chinese, as a peasant and holding a 5,000-year agricultural civilization, we believe in seasons: spring, summer, autumn, winter, which means nothing can keep growing and increasing. If you want to continue growing, you have to fall first, and then you're gonna have the freezing time. That is how the nature works for this land. The same thing. When it comes to economic, we know there must be depression and downturns. The key thing is how can we survive when the downturn comes. Since 1990s, in the Western world, the China's decline has been a very popular in the media, in the academic world. I can understand it is very difficult for the Western mindset to understand how China can still stay resilient in its economic and political places till now. So today, we're gonna explore that secret together. Before we start everything, I will have some basic understanding on the depressions. When a society have overcapacity, which means the factory and the brands produce much more product than what is needed for the market, then corporate will start to lose money or cannot have that big profit as before. So the first thing they will do, they will reduce all the costs, which includes investment for the future, and they will fire a lot of the employee. So a massive layoff, increasing unemployment, and in return, then consumptions will drop down. Then the vicious circle start to run, and that is what we call depressions. And trust me, for China, we have the same exactly challenge as what the Western world have experienced since the last 200 or 300 years. But how can we survive till now? Actually, we learn that from the Great Deal. What we learn is when depression comes, the government or the whole society has to put more money instead of taking the money off from the market to the society, doing more infrastructure buildings, and which can offer much more jobs for its people. When the family have job, they can sustain their consumptions, so we can stop these vicious circles. But why China can do that? The secret thing is the state-owned corporates. In China, it's around 70% of the resources and wealth are owned by Chinese state, the state. But that number in the Western is around 5%. Most famous and big corporate own this country. The problem comes when depression comes. Private-owned corporates are not willing to put their money out into the market and doing infrastructure for decades, and the return over investment is not that good as you put the money into someplace else or just put it in the bank. But owning the state-owned corporate cannot calculating all this win and loss and short-term interests, but insist to put all this money into infrastructures. For example, in China, last year, we spent about 20% of our whole GDP into those very long-term big infrastructure projects, which including building roads in the rural area, building new electric energy system in this rural area, and building tunnels and changing the waterways. And no private companies are willing to do all this because the payback in a very long term And through all these infrastructure buildings, more Chinese people can holding their job, and the consumptions can stay relatively sustainable, and which in turn can support all the small companies and private-owned companies to keep on like their manufacturing abilities. So that's the secret why China can stay as who we are and sustained in the depression times. And another thing is, when depression truly happens, a lot of us, like citizens who lost their job, they can always have a home to go. Why it is like that? Because the modernization, urbanization, and industrialization has very short history in Chinese history. My parents' generation are still living in the rural area, which means they have a self-sufficient, sustainable lifestyle as our ancestors. Whenever I go back to my hometown, I will have food on the table. And at the same time, because we are a communist country, which means that they have really great pension to cover their most costs when they are retired. So the young generation, when they cannot get a job or they lost their job, they can always have a home to go back, which have enough food, have the internet, have the e-business there, and they can spend this winter time and explore some new possibilities. This kind of resilience in the winter time is a key successful factors for the Chinese economic. And besides all that, China is always planning on how winter comes, how can we survive. As long as this land is here, the rural area still keep its lifestyle, the food is on the table. We can survive through those difficulties on depression. And when the depression gone, it's like when the winter come, or when the winter gone, the springtime come out. Because we have such a big population, and those Chinese people are very easily to organize into industrialization because we have a culture of collectiveness. So we can go back to factory to produce more product. And when the investment is much bigger than what is now, our education is mainly focused on engineering and science. So we can easily go back when the economics start to rise and to do things. And when it's low, we can enjoy ourselves in this nature and the rural area, still having the time to pondering, to prepare for the next springtime. That is how Chinese economic myth works.